Hi, my name is Gibson, and I'm the owner and co-creator of the Personal Development School. This is your daily breakthrough video, and in this video, I'm going to talk to you about the 6 stages of relationship and how this impacts the fearful avoidant attachment style. So before I get into this video, and I'm going to go through like a lot of high-level points, so what the 6 stages are essentially, and then what patterns and protest behaviors and challenges you can sort of expect to arise at each of these different stages. So before I do this like deep dive into all this content, I do want to say 2 quick things. Number one, I have a discount for the Personal Development School membership bundles. So like 3-month, 6-month, 12-month subscriptions and 8-month just for Valentine's Day weekend. So by the time you see this video, you'll have it for like a day, maybe 2 days afterwards. And the coupon code is PDSVDAY, all one word, capital letters, and it'll give you 25% off. So check that out. And number 2, I have just written and published a book called The Attachment Theory Guide. And it's basically like a way to navigate your romantic relationships. And based on your attachment style, there's different directions and exercises for processing. And the link for that for the pre-sale is also in the description box below. So I'm really excited to be sharing that. Anyways, so I'm going to get into the sort of work for today. I'm used to saying that to people, the work for today, the content for today. So if you're not familiar already, there are 6 main stages in relationships. And I'm deriving these stages from Dr. Susan Campbell, who talks about 5 main stages, but I found it extremely important to separate the honeymoon phase into first the dating phase, especially when it comes to attachment styles, because different attachment styles operate so differently in the dating stage of relationships. So this can be like one of the problems that we run into. And if you've watched my videos on the other attachment styles and how they show up in the dating aspects of relationship, you'll see that there's this very strong difference in the dating stage. So let's say you take the dismissive avoidant, for example. The dismissive avoidant usually likes to be in the dating stage for a long time. They like to be in there for like more than 6 months because they don't want to make a commitment right away. They want to take the time to assess, to analyze, to see if they're safe, to sort of like test the ropes a little bit to see like, is this going to be an appropriate relationship? Does this work from both an analytical and sort of emotional standpoint? Now, this can be a problem when you have somebody who's like the anxiously attached individual or the fearful avoidant who wants to spend much less time there, make a commitment to a certain degree, although fearful avoidants can, you'll see as we go through this, have their reservations about that. But this can be like a space of creating chaos accidentally when we have somebody in the dating stage of a relationship who wants to move at one pace and somebody else who wants to move at a totally separate pace and make a commitment and move right into the honeymoon phase immediately. And this can leave a gap where the mind will fill in the blanks. And one person will go, oh my gosh, if they're not making a commitment right away, they must not like me, they must not be that interested, and they'll overcompensate or they'll feel insecure or their self-esteem will be impacted. Whereas the other person might feel forced into a commitment and then need to protect themselves. And so it's not necessarily a reflection of how much the person cares or values you. It's much more a reflection of how somebody shows up at each of the different stages and the reasoning for why, and their unconscious expectations, needs, and perceptions about what a relationship is supposed to look like, what the rules are for navigating each stage according to their conditioned patterns, and what they expect because of what they've seen or been exposed to. And so when we don't understand that, then we have this like these really intense breeding grounds essentially for chaos to occur. So I'm going to go through, talk to you about the different 6 stages and a little bit at a high level, obviously, because I can't make this video super long, a high level about how each attachment style navigates each of the 6 stages. And I do have advanced attachment style courses inside the Personal Development School, as well as like introductory ones that will take you through each of the 6 stages at a very detailed level, go through the different protest behaviors, the subconscious reprogramming strategies, just the challenges that come up and the differences between yourself and other attachment styles. So but I wanted to share this here because it's like really important information that everybody should know. So number 1, the dating stage. So this stage usually lasts between 0 to 6 months, depending largely on your attachment style. So sometimes you'll see an anxiously attached individual and they'll want to be, making the commitment to be exclusively connected to one another in dating and focus your attention on one another. Sometimes they want to make that commitment after the first date. Sometimes they want to make that commitment, 2 weeks in, 3 weeks in. Usually by the 2-month mark, they're starting to feel frustrated or stressed. Dismissive avoidants usually want to make a commitment 4 to 6 months, sometimes longer if there's outliers in the situation, people who are extremely dismissive avoidant or are very dismissive avoidant, and that's combined with like a stressful period of their life or any like emotional challenges they're experiencing. And then we have the fearful avoidant, who generally feels really great during the dating stage of a relationship. And this is sort of like how the fearful avoidant feels like their best self. They tend to show up, they are great connectors, they're charming, charismatic, and it's usually not until there's a presentation for the availability of commitment to take place that then they start to have their avoidant side kick in. So sometimes the fearful avoidant will seem anxious in the dating stages of a relationship, but it's not until there's like the opportunity for a commitment that you'll see them start to like deactivate. Now that deactivating can take place in very obvious forms, like actually fearing the commitment, shying away from it, withdrawing, wanting space, saying they're afraid to commit, not trusting fully. But then it can also take place in these sort of non-obvious forms, these more subtle forms. And these more subtle forms are things like, one example of this, okay, is any deactivating thoughts that show up. So hyper focusing on their partner's faults all of a sudden, hyper focusing on what could go wrong in their relationship, emotionally dysregulating, feeling very vulnerable and untrusting, and then pushing the person away to protect themselves, blaming their partner more, accusing their partner, all these things that seem like they're almost ways of straightening out the relationship, but are actually sometimes subconscious self-sabotage mechanisms that are trying to create distance between themselves and their partner because they're afraid and they feel unsafe. So the dating stage is like a little bit blissful in a way for the fearful avoidant until there's like the starting to move into the honeymoon phase or towards the honeymoon phase. And then when this commitment piece comes up, you'll almost see immediately that the fearful avoidant goes into the honeymoon stage and then immediately starts oscillating between the honeymoon stage and the next stage, which is the power struggle stage. Now, this doesn't happen with other attachment styles. They usually tend to, unless they're dating the fearful avoidant, they usually tend to either, stay a really long time in the dating stage and then move somewhat quickly from the honeymoon stage to the power struggle stage, but there's still like, 6 months to a year and a half gap. You have the anxiously attached who like wants to stay in the honeymoon phase forever, and really stay there, which isn't like, some people are like, why is that a bad thing? It's not really a bad thing to have the honeymoon stage. It's a beautiful stage of a relationship, but it stops the life cycle of the relationship from maturing. And ultimately you want to get to the bliss stage, which is the 6th stage that we'll go through. And in order to get that, you have to go through all the rites of passage, the lessons and the learnings of each of the proceeding stages, so that you can develop this love where, it's deep and it's honeymoon-like, but your sense of self is also integrated into the picture. Your communication, your ability to work out conflict, all these different things are worked out. And that actually happens through going through each of the stages. And so sometimes, we can want to hold on to one stage for too long. And it might look like, oh, we want to stay in this beautiful stage and this blissful stage, but it can be stunting the growth of your relationship and preventing you from having the natural sort of ebbs and flows of the life cycle of it, which ultimately prevents you from getting to the point that you're trying to really achieve, which is to have yourself and have love too in a blissful space. So for the fearful avoidance specifically, usually as soon as the honeymoon phase arrives, they start to experience their triggers and wounds coming up almost immediately. And this is where you'll really start to see like the avoidant side of the fearful avoidant come to life. And they'll start to get really triggered around different wounds, different interactions, their needs not being met. And they struggle to, as a general rule, integrate their sense of self into the romantic partnership. So they struggle to have their needs met, because usually they're carrying these deep belief systems that say, well, I'm not worthy of having my needs met. Or if I express my needs, it's not going to go well. They're not going to be met anyway. So there's no point. And over time, they start to create this imbalance of how much they give to the relationship versus how much they're receiving. And these are the breeding grounds for like the volcano to erupt, right? And so that can be a big factor. And then in the power struggle stage, there are very important lessons in protest behaviors, and there's so much information I can give you. But this tends to be a make or break stage of a relationship, and you need the proper tools, and you need to be equipped effectively in order to really thrive in this stage. And the power struggle stage, although it's like, the scary stage of the relationship and all these things, it's also the stage of the relationship with the most opportunities for growth and depth and beauty. You're setting the foundation for beautiful things to take place if you move through the power struggle stage effectively. And the rites of passage and requirements to move through this stage are being vulnerable, being accepting of your vulnerability and your partner's, being able to understand and empathize with your partner's needs and feelings, and to start to take them in and make sense of them. And empathize doesn't mean like sympathize, like feel bad for, like connect to, but to actually understand where the person is coming from and why they are feeling the things they're feeling, or why they're needing what they're needing, and to really get a grasp on that understanding. And then to also feel like you can express your own feelings and needs vulnerably, respectfully, consistently, and from an emotional regulated space, so that you can start to really learn each other and really understand each other, and take off the mask of your best behavior that shows up in the honeymoon phase, and get to really know your partner for all of their imperfections. And once you've done that effectively and accepted your partner for their flaws, then you can move into the stability stage. So there's so much more I can say about like all the power struggle tools and the things to go through and the things to be aware of. But for now, because I can't make this video, hours long, those are some important high-level tips that I really hope you tune into and write down and sort of strategize around, because really these are like make or break situations in romantic partnerships. And not only does fixing these things and moving through these things help you personally in your romantic relationship and really make or break that, but it helps you in all areas of life. Because if you master conflict communication, if you master understanding where people are coming from and not, telling stories around things and creating more of your own suffering unconsciously, and if you master understanding your needs and identifying them and expressing your feelings and making your feelings okay, this spills into all 7 areas of your life. This spills into how you show up in terms of your physical health, your mental, emotional health, your other relationships outside of friendships, your working relationships, your workplace, your work in general, because you can focus if you're not traumatized by your relationship on a daily basis. Like, this is so important. So while the power struggle gets a bad rap, it's also like the ultimate space for growth and the ultimate space to benefit you in all areas of your life. So I think that approaching it that way and seeing it through that lens is very beneficial, because it prevents us from like just fearing it and avoiding it and thinking this is so terrible and awful that we're in this stage. And that's, if you change your relationship to what the power struggle stage means, you change your romantic relationship as a result, right? It makes it easier to navigate any challenges that come up. You see them as learning opportunities instead of just unnecessary suffering or pain points. So, the stability stage. This is what happens when we move through the power struggle stage effectively. And the stability stage is really characterized by feeling like we have a deeper acceptance of one another, feeling safe, feeling connected, feeling like a lot of the drama starts to fade away, feeling like we understand one another better and more effectively. There's this deep, healthy connection. And in this stage, we've naturally started to take each other's needs into consideration and just made adjustments accordingly. So for example, if you know that your partner doesn't like to stay out late and you're at some kind of social event, you might naturally just be thinking, without having to have a conversation or an argument or, all these things come up, you might just naturally know, okay, well, we're going to go there at 6, so we should probably leave by 9:30 so my partner feels good. And you've started to settle into where you can make the compromises, okay? Or to know that if I go to the social event alone and my partner needs to feel validated, maybe I send them a loving text while I'm there, or, things like that. So these things start to become like a natural part of your patterning, because you've really learned each other by this stage. And once you've mastered that stage, one of the downsides of the stage is there can be feelings of boredom, and couples can start sort of like thinking about or fantasizing about other people if they're not aware of certain needs that they have that aren't being met in the relationship. Because when we fantasize outside of our relationship, it is almost always a direct representation of unmet needs that you have in your life from your partner, and you're not aware of them. And so the brain infatuates with things that are meeting its needs, if that makes sense. And you can, obviously your partner's not supposed to meet every need ever that you ever have. But sometimes these are cool tools because you can look at it and be like, oh, if I'm infatuated with something over there, like a person over there, or something, a behavior that somebody's doing, I just need to ask for that in my relationship. And that'll bring that stability and depth of connection back into this stage of my partnership. So that brings us to the commitment stage. And I'm just going to go through really high level because I know this video is getting a little bit long, but the commitment stage is the stage where you actually want to be making a commitment. Most couples honestly get married in the honeymoon stage and then enter the power struggle stage after being married, and then are like, what is this? But the commitment stage is the time to really buckle down, think about what you want, what you value, have those conversations, and then make a commitment to one another. And this means the rites of passage in this stage are to not just be like, let's get married or have kids or buy a house or whatever it is, or live together, whatever it is. What is required in this stage, the commitment stage, is to truly assess, like, do our values line up? Do our needs line up? What do we want for the future? Do our visions of the future line up? Where do they not, and how can we align them more effectively? Do we both want the same things? We both want children. Do we both want a certain type of lifestyle? Do we want to travel? Do we want to move around? Like, all of these things, the rites of passage and the commitment stage are to have these conversations. How do you want to raise your kids? What are important values to bring into the relationship to your children? All of these things are extremely important in this stage. And if you've mastered this stage, you move into the bliss stage. And the idea for the bliss stage is that it's like the honeymoon stage, but as I said earlier, you actually have your sense of self in it. So the honeymoon stage isn't like, ooh, we're falling in love and we have all these neurochemicals and we have our masks on of like our best selves that we're showing to one another. And that's beautiful. It really is a beautiful time in relationships, and it's wonderful. But sometimes the downside of it is that you can lose your sense of self in that time. You can be so hyper-focused on the other person that you're not really integrating your sense of self, and the person hasn't seen all your flaws and accepted them and moved through them with you yet. And so the bliss stage is like being back in that like wonderful honeymoon stage where you've got that excitement and connection and great habits and feeling really warm and really like fuzzy and bubbly and excited around your partner. But it's also that you've learned each other, you know each other's needs, you take them naturally into consideration, you've had the tough conversations. And so now there's like this much deeper beauty in that because you have yourself and the relationship too. And for you to move to the bliss stage, you have to sort of have done a lot of personal growth work and navigated it well. So if you find that you're in this stage of relationship, power to you. It means you've checked a lot of the necessary boxes. And if you're struggling, then chances are you're struggling with certain rites of passage or lessons that are supposed to come through one of the phases of the relationship you're in. So what you can do with this is identify what stage you're in based on some of the patterns you've heard from this video and what you really need, what you're getting stuck on, and what you need to move into the next stage. And that's a wonderful place to start to gather new information and have the opportunity to move through places that might be blind spots between yourself and your partner in the relationship. So I hope that's helpful. Thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.